Well, I think first I want to thank everybody for making the time here. This is the sixth Research Innovation Conference. We've really grown in leaps and bounds. When we started the first innovation conference, it was just about EPRA and our colleagues. And we grew it to now the sector, and now we've grown it to a country event, and now it's an international event with competition across the globe. The research conference is really key because, as I've said earlier on, we need to make data-driven decision. We need research because today we are living in a world where technology is getting ahead of regulation, getting ahead of policy making, and there is constant change from a technological standpoint, from a research standpoint. And for the country to continue offering reliable and quality and affordable energy for all, which is part of our mantra as a regulator, we need to be at the cutting edge and the tip of the spear to ensure that we're adopting global best practice that is suited for local circumstances.
Mine is on currently Kenya is operating around the together with the government. We become an exporter of power from a neighboring country. What is the
Well, I think when it comes first to the issue of our power capacity, yes, it is true that we had a challenge from when we had the moratorium that was placed on IPPs in 2018. The matter was a matter of the executive, it grew into a matter also of the legislature and the other arm of government, which pronounced itself. We are actively engaging with Parliament as a regulator, with the policymakers and the ministry to have that matter resolved. But at the end of the day, the challenge that we're having is a good challenge to have because our demand has been growing year on year. This is really a good sign of good economic growth, but ultimately for us as a regulator, because as part of this research and innovation process, our role is also to advise policymakers, to advise business people, and also to advise academia on where we are in our energy sector. If you look at our energy and petroleum statistics report, you can see, yes, correct, we don't have a reserve margin. We've become, I would say, a net importer of power from the region. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because even as Kenya, we are part of the East African Power Pool, which runs from Libya all the way down to Tanzania. We have 16 countries in the power pool. What we're looking to do is to leverage the different strengths of different countries. Kenya is strong on geothermal, Ethiopia is strong on hydro, Tanzania built a big hydro power plant, same as Uganda. We have strong wind resources. We have Egypt being very strong when it comes to oil and gas, natural gas particularly. The same for instance in Libya. The essence of the power pool is to be able to leverage on these strengths and eventually have a power market. So really buying power from our neighboring countries is not necessarily a bad thing. But again, there's an issue of national security, there's issue of energy security, that we need to be self-sustaining, but also Kenya needs to be able to develop its geothermal resource, other resources, to be able to export power into our neighboring countries. And one of the big interlinkages that we're looking at is the interconnectivity of East African power pool to the Southern African power pool, because also the Southern African power pool has energy deficit, and that is really a big mining country. When you talk to countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, a lot of copper mining, and we require the resources also in South Africa. So there's both an energy security standpoint in Kenya, the need for interconnectivity so that we can leverage on our different strengths in different countries, but also commercially benefit from the opportunity of selling to other countries. So we've been engaging with Parliament, we've been engaging with the policymakers to ensure that we're able first to address our energy security needs as a country, and then second, be able then to interconnect with the region and be able to sell our power also to the region to be able to bring in revenue to the country.
So how much are you importing?
So we already on we have a PPA with Ethiopia, which is a farm PPA for 400 megawatts. We have 200 megawatts already in the grid. This is a PPA that was signed sometime towards actually the first week of August 2022. That's when the PPA was signed. This is a project that has been in the works for the last 10 years. We have an energy exchange agreement with Uganda, which has also been in place for quite a while. We also have an energy exchange agreement with Tanzania through the utility KPLC and TANESCO. You have also KPLC and UTCL in Uganda. These two are energy exchange agreements. Energy exchange agreements basically is when they have the power to sell to us, they can sell to us. When we have the power, we can be able to exchange with them, but it is based on availability, so it's not a farm PPA. But with Ethiopia, we do have a farm PPA with Ethiopia, which today we're taking 200 megawatts. We are going to go up to 400 megawatts. And this is a project that has been in the works for the last 10 to 20 years between the two countries.
So what's the deficit, energy deficit? Currently, how many megawatts?
Well, this year we have 283 megawatts of a deficit in our mix. Our reserve margin sometimes is less than 5 megawatts, and this is a big challenge because because you have planned outages because our power plants have to go out for maintenance sometimes. We also have unplanned maintenance. So we really need to have, the rule of thumb is we need to have at least 15% of our installed capacity of the reserve margin. Because when you take out a power plant, you need to have some spare capacity. The other challenge that we've seen as a regulator is on average it takes about 5 to 7 years to develop a project, particularly geothermal projects in our country. And because of that long lead time, the need to be able to, because people only look at one thing, they say, okay, well, we need to have a PPA signed. Once you have a PPA signed, you have to work towards financial close. You have to work with lenders, you have to work with lawyers, you have to work with landowners, and that process takes time in our country. So the big challenge that we see as a regulator is not even the challenge of signing up new PPAs, but the time that it takes for them to reach financial close, and then the time for financial close for them to get into construction, and eventually to commercial operation, which are able now to give us the power. But as I've said, we're actively working with policymakers and also with our legislators to ensure that we're able to unlock this bottleneck. We as a regulator are happy to fast track these projects because the law requires that all these agreements must come to us as a regulator for approval. But at the end of the day, they keep saying, the most expensive power is no power at all. So at the end of the day, we have to work concertedly between the two arms of government, the executive and the legislature, to be able to ensure that consumers are well served.
Just one or two questions from me. You're talking about getting us to object the entire 400 megawatts from Ethiopia. What timelines are we looking at? Number two, are you looking to expand the infrastructure to enable that to happen? And what is that? How much is that likely to cost? And back to this program that is happening here. Can you tell us, are there any commitments from EPRA in terms of financial commitments to the researchers that maybe if you have a research that you want to enroll, you're willing to set aside X amount?
Well, I think in terms of the PPA, we have a PPA already of 400 megawatts. The price is already agreed in 2022. The line does have the capacity to convert with DC power. The reason we are going to Ethiopia and there was a technical having engagement with Ethiopia to try to see whether we can be able to fast track some of that capacity on the basis of their availability, because we do need it in the short term. As I've said, it takes a long time to develop our power projects in our country. But how do we then deal with the intervening period of the deficit that we have in this year? Is can we be able to have an engagement to be able to bring in more power from our neighbors, our people of ours?
Maybe you expand more in terms of university. Talk about universities and the way they are doing financially, and just bringing the youth and profession perspective.
Yes, I think one of the main drivers of EPRA, not only in our legal mandate of maintaining energy and petroleum data, and also undertaking research for the energy and petroleum sectors, we as a regulator feel very strongly that there needs to be very strong collaboration between academia, the private sector, and the government to bring it all together to ensure that we drive research that is impactful in our economy and impactful in people's lives. As I've said, a lot of times our academia have been doing a lot of research. All of you have gone either to tertiary institutions or to universities, but the question we ask ourselves is how much of that research has been applied for practical purposes for the good of the country? Not very much. So what we're trying to do is how do we bring private sector capital to fund some of the research that Jim is asking us about. Are we willing to put in money because we are in a competitive environment? These resources are competing to fund different priorities within government, whether it's education, healthcare, agriculture. But how do we bring in private sector to work with academia so that then we can be able to fund research that makes even energy solutions cheaper? How do we work with private sector to bring in private sector capital into research so that then we can be able to create opportunities for these researchers to move away from their labs, move away from their libraries into commercial spaces where they can now work with this private sector and be able to earn a living as well. So really it's a three-pronged approach for us as EPRA, is to bring in the research and innovation week to be able to catalyze research not only within the energy sector but also with private researchers and also the students from high schools through their clubs, through to universities and tertiary colleges, be able to bring that research, bring them to the research and innovation week, connect that research idea with opportunities for private sector and also support of government policies and regulations to ensure that we have research that is impactful to our people and also impactful to the country.
Okay, a clarification. You talked of has already been sent out to just get what are you going to remove this out from your okay.
Well, it's an ongoing conversation. I think there was a team there a couple of weeks ago. The next level will be engagement at the policy level, at the ministry level, and eventually then the policy guidance in the utility. Because at the end of the day, it's a commercial conversation between the utility, which is majority owned by the government, because it's a commercial conversation between the utility and the utility of the other side, as facilitated by the government. Once they negotiate and they reach a commercial understanding, that will then be subject to regulatory approval. So that is a conversation that's ongoing between the utility and their counterpart on the other side and the government, which is facilitated at a policy level. Ultimately, once they have a commercial understanding, that must come back to the regulators.
Talking about illegal connections in the Nairobi County or the slums, you've said that you wanted those people who are connecting power illegally with license. Maybe it's part of that.
Well, I think there is an initiative by the utility Kenya Power for them to be able to distribute, because we have developed a regulation as the regulator for bulk supply and open access. Open access is a principle that is there in the law. Bulk supply will allow you and I, form a business, to be able to get the utility, buy in bulk, and then retail power consumers, whether it's in an estate or it's in a formal settlement. Because as I say, we have very high losses. But the utility sometimes are challenging collecting some of these informal settlements. But there are those, because we all live in Kenya, there are those who are able to be able to manage that local, as we call it, the Kadogo economy. So it's easier for Kenya Power to sell in bulk to some of these people in those areas for them to be able to retail. And I think it's something that Kenya Power is doing. When it comes to regularizing some of these illegal connections, some of these connections have been built by electrician, the electrical contractor, but they've not been sanctioned either by direct agreements. But where that line has been built and has been built up to standard, I think the conversation has been the conversation that's ongoing between the state government, utility KPLC, and the policymakers and the executive, is how can some of these lines be regularized so that then the consumer is not disadvantaged, because some of the consumers were not aware that the connection is an illegal connection, quote unquote. But for them, they are looking for supply. So when they don't have the supply, how do we then ensure that we are not being imprudent in terms of decommissioning or demolishing these facilities if they have been built from scratch? Is how do we then regularize them so that then the consumer can have access?
It's now 2 years since Africa Oil exited the great project with Shell in Kupana. Why has the government still not approved?
Well, I think there was a deed of assignment that was submitted to the government, to the cabinet secretary, because that's what provided for the law. I believe that is a process that has been under consideration. But as you well know, there have been evolution of this project because Total and Africa Oil have put in their exit. The government has been asking and has been engaging on a strategic partner for Talo. We see now that Talo has gotten another partner. That process is going through approvals on their end, and eventually will come to government for regulatory approvals because the transaction is not closed. Once then there's clarity, then I'm sure the government through the cabinet secretary will be able to consider.
Do you have any estimates?
No, I don't have any time.
But I saw Gulf Energy.
Sorry?
Gulf Energy in the mix.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the final one for me is it still the government position that Kenya Power should hand over some of their transmission assets to
Yes, I think that's the government policy position that there needs to be, as I said in the room earlier, that there is a clear demarcation of transfer of assets from Kenya Power to Ketraco, so that you can have a clear-cut separation between transmission and distribution and retail. But ultimately, that is also a commercial conversation because Kenya Power is a listed company. Those assets are sitting on their balance sheet. They have other shareholders that are not also government, the private sector. So that then if you're taking away an asset, you must be able to compensate them, isn't it? So there is a conversation on a payment that needs to come from Ketraco through their shareholder to Kenya Power to compensate them for that transfer of assets.
But this has been scheduled to be completed by February this year.
Well, I think I don't have the full facts as it is now, but where I left it at is that there was a valuation that was ongoing, and then the shareholder we needed to have a conversation as to where they're going to get the resources from to be able to pay off the utility for those assets to be transferred. Thanks, people.